Call back, Jane.
Dean, you're live with Eric and V. How are you doing?
Hey, what's going on, guys?
What's good, brother?
Dean, you finally called me.
Oh, you're going to have that conversation.
I've been waiting for you, man.
Okay, you two talk for a minute. I'm going to run to the restroom. I'll be right back.
I have to do this just because I saw it on Twitter. So, on Atheism V.
Oh, you did not.
Just kidding.
You went there.
I'm kidding. So, my question is actually similar, I guess, in category to what Jonathan talked about.
Okay.
One of the things that, I often hear is that, we don't know who wrote the Gospels.
Mm-hmm.
And that seems to lead into the idea that because we don't know who wrote the Gospels, these aren't historical. I guess my question would be, does the anonymity of a document impede on its historicity? So just because a document doesn't have a name attached to it,
right,
does that mean that it's not historical?
No, not necessarily. I think I understand where you're coming from. That conversation tends to get written into shorthand a lot. And so people skip over important pieces of that conversation because it's implied that everybody's on the same page, but it's worth going over in its entirety. I don't think nobody is arguing that the Gospels were not written at the time that historians say they were written. They were written around, anywhere from 60 AD to 90 AD or within that time frame. Nobody's saying that that's not the case. And nobody is necessarily saying that what they are recounting is a myth. I know that's some people's interpretation of it. I'm on the fence about where to stand with that, but I'm not saying that just because we don't have the names that we can't trust anything that they say. My concern is when people think that the names Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are representative of the actual characters and therefore are giving the books that added authority of these were written by the people who experienced it. And that's what we counter when we say, those aren't the actual authors of these books.
Yeah, and I wonder if in this dialogue that we have between those who believe and those who don't, if that piece even matters, right? I don't know that it necessarily follows that even if it were written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, I don't see why that would matter when it comes to ultimately, is this document historical or not? I guess the only piece that it would help or hinder was that these are the, eyewitnesses or close acquaintances of the eyewitnesses in the case of Luke. Would you agree with that? That's kind of where that would be a spot where it would help or hinder.
Yeah, okay. I think on the one hand, I do agree with you. I think that should never be something you build an entire argument on, right? I'm not an atheist because the books of the Bible were written by people who weren't Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, right? And nobody is a theist because they were written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. So ultimately, that question is something we should clear up if somebody is confused about it. But I don't see it as being a linchpin in anybody's faith journey necessarily. And so I don't necessarily see that as being impactful in the long run. But it's worth pointing out, especially to people who might be under the impression that they know more about the Bible than they actually do.
So in the same way that whether they were written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John or not, that wouldn't determine me personally about whether or not I was a Christian. And likewise, even if it were written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, that wouldn't be something that would push you more towards theism or Christianity, would it?
So, hey, Dean.
Hey, what's going on, man?
Hey, man. Question.
Yeah.
So let's say you're wanting to invest your money, and I hand you two pamphlets, and they're both saying you should invest your money with, either this fund or that fund. Wouldn't you want to do a little bit more research onto who wrote the pamphlet before you invest your money?
I'd probably want to know more about the company than who wrote the pamphlet. But I see your analogy.
Like, if we're talking about something that's entirely mundane, then yeah, it doesn't really matter. But if the stakes are accepting a religion, it is to the exclusion of a life that does not involve that. And in a whole lot of cases, it can come with a lot of predatory practices. It can come with a lot of, couched bigotry. And it can also come with, there are just so many pieces there that you really, if you're, and if you do believe, right, the idea of heaven and hell, those are infinitely good and infinitely bad, right? It's a whole lot higher stakes than investing your money. So if you would want some more information on the reliability of the person who wrote the pamphlet to invest your money, but you're just fine relying on an unknown author, I would actually want to know a whole lot more about the authors before I took their word on a thing. It would help.
Okay, so I think I see what you're saying there, that knowing who the authors were helps us determine, maybe if we knew that if the author was a habitual liar, then that lends us to, move more towards, okay, in all probability, because we know that this person's a habitual liar, therefore there's a higher probability that this document might be skewed. Is that essentially what you're saying?
Or just pushing any kind of agenda at all. It's the same reason why things like Facebook and Twitter are using new formulas to make sure that if you're getting a political ad through their website, it's required that ad show where they come from and what company they're affiliated with, so that you can then look at that information and filter it through the necessary, okay, this is an ad for a political candidate who wants to run for office, and so I'm going to take that with this understanding, as opposed to, this is an article from the BBC that's just telling me things that are happening in the world from a non-subjective standpoint. So, it doesn't necessarily have to be, are they truthful or are they liars? It would just be, where is this information coming from and why am I getting it?
Right. And on the personal note, the one that I wanted to bring up was L. Ron Hubbard. Right? You talk about science.
Is what?
L. Ron Hubbard. Right?
Oh, gotcha.
So does the fact that L. Ron Hubbard is the fact that he was a sci-fi writer, does that have any impact on whether or not you believe the truth claim of the sci-fi religion that he started thereafter? There's...
I mean, initially my reaction would be, well, it seems like there's a correlation there.
It doesn't mean there's a causal link, but it definitely means that we should take it into account.
That's all I'm saying is we should take it into account. I'm not saying that that's the case.
Absolutely.
I guess the only reason I go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead. What's up?
Well, I guess my only question is, like, even if it were anonymous, let me use an analogy. Say I got a letter about an anonymous letter about an event that's, happened in the past, and there was no author attached to it. And then a buddy of mine got a different letter that was recounting the same event slightly differently. It was also anonymous, and they collaborated together. It wouldn't matter. I guess my point is, it wouldn't necessarily matter who the author was. The events corroborate. Therefore, okay.
Well, what matters is the stakes on the line. If you're talking about something that's entirely mundane, it doesn't matter. But we're not talking about something entirely mundane, are we?
No, not at all.
Well, also, there's and this is, I'm not sure how far this analogy tracks to the actual case we're discussing, but if we want to talk about two people saying something fantastic that corroborate without attaching names, I mean, my first thought wouldn't be this is true. My first thought is either I'm getting doxxed, or like this is a prank and more people are in on it, or maybe this one person just put a different address on the envelope and sent me a different letter written with his left hand instead of his right hand. There are reasons that we put names to things that people say, and it's to enable us to, do that research and to make sure that we are being told, as true things as we can possibly be told.
Mm-hmm.
So, my first thought would be, two people telling me the same thing, especially if it was out of the realm of the ordinary, I'd suspect a collaboration between them before I suspected that the extraordinary thing was true.
Yeah.
There's a reason why you're not using a pseudonym, Dean. There's a reason why I'm on as Eric Murphy and V's on as Villa Bianca. Because there's a lot to that. Now, that said, I think we've got enough time for one more caller. Was there anything else that y'all... Nope. Okie doke.
Awesome. Thanks for calling in,
Thanks,
Dean.
guys. Hey, no problem, guys. Take care. All right.
What happened to the Kalam?
I don't know.
I was waiting for this build-up about Kalam. What happened?
I don't know. I think he's scared.
Why didn't you bring it up?
Because he wanted to talk about something